Hey everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Everyone, thanks so much for being with me tonight. And I'm so excited. I have Michael Fleeman on the show tonight. Oh my God, you know how we all love true crime and unsolved murder mysteries. It's one of my favorite topics. For all of you who have just joined us for the first time, if you would please subscribe, and everybody please give the show a like, I'd really appreciate it. So everybody, you know what? Let's welcome Michael Fleeman to the show. Michael, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. I was so excited. I had searched and searched for somebody who was involved with true crime. And I came across you. Oh, actually, you know what? I think it was a Mr. Newton, and he gave me your information, and that's how I found you. Oh, thank you so much for joining us tonight. So before we start the show, would you please tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, like I said, I write true crime books. I've got 10 titles now, and I'm just finishing up another one about the Harold Henthorn case in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's going to be on Dateline, actually, this Friday. So it's a big case, and that's my next one coming out. And I have 9 other ones. I started out as a regular news reporter at the Associated Press and covered cops and courts. I covered the O.J. Simpson trial, so it's been very exciting watching the news series, and some other big trials. And after that, I went into entertainment reporting, but I always kept one foot in crime reporting, and I started writing these books about 15 years ago. And I started with If I Die. It's a book about a murder case in Las Vegas with a millionaire named Ron Rudin, who was allegedly killed by his wife. And I've done a bunch since. It's interesting now because true crime I've been doing it for a long time, and it's just really never been hotter and more interesting with making a murderer and serial and those sorts of things. So it's an exciting time to be telling these kinds of stories.
Yeah. Hey, also, you wrote a book on, oh my God, the Peterson case. What was her name?
Lacey Peterson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, can I just ask you something about that case?
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. My feeling is, and this is just a total opinion, but my feeling is Scott Peterson and her husband, did not mean to kill her, that they got into a very, very nasty fight, and she banged her head on the counter or whatever and ended up dead. Yeah. And he freaked out and disposed of the body. And by the time, the police were on to him, it was really too late, and it was impossible for him to make it to the case. That's just my sense, because he's not a dumb guy. It's just so unbelievably stupid to have done this. He would have been, the first suspect anyway.
Yeah. All right, so you know what? Let's start the show.
Sure.
And let's talk about the Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
I want to tell you, do you know that Steve Hodel, he was going to come on my show 4 years ago. I've been doing this since 2008, and he was going to come on my show, and I was so excited because we wanted to talk about the Black Dahlia, and we had actually gone because the cemetery is only about 20 minutes from my house.
Oh, that's right. She's buried in Northern California.
Yes, and in Oakland, and she's buried there. I had a heck of a time trying to find her grave. It was, oh my God, she's on a hill, and it was awful. I could not find her, but we finally found it. I actually brought my voice recorder with me, and I sat and talked with her for a while, but I didn't get anything on my voice recorder.
No clues, huh?
No. So let's talk about the Black Dahlia.
Yeah, it's a great case. It's funny because I just saw Steve Hodel speak in Santa Monica the other night. I just finished reading his latest book, Most Evil 2, which is about the Zodiac killer. We talk about that later. But Black Dahlia it's just that probably the biggest unsolved case in Los Angeles, and probably the most infamous, notorious unsolved murder anywhere. It concerns a woman named Elizabeth Short, and I looked up. She was only 22 years old. She seemed so old and worldly, but she was a 22-year-old woman from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And, you know, she came out to California, actually, I think to Oakland, San Francisco area, to hook up with her long estranged father. And she worked her way down to Lompoc. I think it was called Camp Cook. It's now Vandenberg Air Force Base. And she worked in the PX there. And about 6 months before she died, she ended up in Los Angeles. And there are a lot of theories about what kind of life she lived. She clearly was a woman who relied on men for money, hooked up with men, probably had sex with them to get some cash. She had a very vivid imagination, and she would spin all these tales about soldiers she was married to or engaged to. She did have one apparent romance with a guy who ended up dying after the war. She'd hang out in bars. She'd hang out with men that she would just meet that night. Very much a party girl. And one morning in January 1947, her body ended up in a vacant lot in Los Angeles, and it was discovered by excuse me, let me just log back in. It was discovered by a woman. I think she was pushing her baby around.
Yeah.
And the body had been cut in half. The blood had been drained from it. There was all kinds of abuse. Horrific scene. And police came, and they investigated the case, and it was never solved. At one point, very early on, the killer contacted the newspaper and sent the paper to prove that he was the killer, sent the paper, I think, birth certificates and some other documents that only the killer would have,
right, and
started taunting the police. And these letters, some were handwritten, some used things they clipped out of other publications. And this went on for some time, and police, although they had certain leads, and we found out later they had some very good leads, but at the time it went down as unsolved, and it's officially unsolved to this day. And the case, it became very much part of popular culture. Movies were made out of it, and James Ellroy wrote a very famous book, a highly fictionalized book about it. But it sort of captures this noir period in Los Angeles. She symbolizes all the young girls who come out to LA seeking their, to become famous, and it just goes so badly. And, there were so many sexual overtones to the case.
Oh.
And the fact that, she was bisected suggested it was a doctor, so that, an interesting subject. So it was a very fascinating case and endured, half a century later.
We're talking about the Black Dahlia. Now, I read that she was a young girl and she had been arrested for drunkenness.
Yeah, she was, I think she might have even been underage at the time. She had been partying or drinking with friends or something. She was only 22 when she died.
I know. You don't really. She really looks older than what she really was. Also, the rumors always had been around that she was a prostitute. And
I don't think that was so. I don't think she was technically a prostitute. She certainly hooked up with guys who would buy her drinks, dinner, give her, a few bucks. Does that make her officially a prostitute? That certainly near the end of her life, there's a lot of evidence that, she hooked up with a guy in San Diego, and I think he gave her some money, so she was able to support herself that way.
Yeah, I read that was just talk. It wasn't really. She was not really that promiscuous. And of course, the LA Police Department said it was one of the most gruesome murders they had ever seen.
Yeah, it was just, it's horrific, and even veteran cops were just sickened by the whole thing, and it was almost literally and figuratively surgical, and it looked like this was somebody who knew anatomy, who knew surgery, who could really do something not just bad, but professionally bad on this one.
Right, and they believe that whoever did this must have been a doctor.
Yeah, and I think the most compelling case is, not to get too gruesome about it. She was cut in half, but she wasn't just cut in half. She was cut in half in a way that they treat doctors when they're conducting autopsies to cut people in half, in the way that the vertebrae was severed in all this. So it was done with a lot of precision, and it was probably done with a surgical tool also, like a scalpel.
Right, so that brings us to Steve Hodel. Tell them about Steve Hodel.
Well, Steve Hodel is he was a veteran detective for the Los Angeles Police Department. He retired. He had a very unusual and a strange relationship with his father, George Hill Hodel. And I think it was after he left the force, his father died, and he was going through his father's belongings, and he came across, and I think it was his stepmother, gave this to him, a little photo album. And inside this album was a photo that Steve had never seen, that his father had never shown him before. And he looked at it, and he came to believe that it was a picture of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, and that his father had carried it with him for decades and decades. And this sent Steve on a years-long obsession, really, to find out whether or not his father killed the Black Dahlia. And he's written several books about it. And not to, spoiler alert, but I think he made a very, very good case that his father did, in fact, kill Elizabeth Short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, also, they said the body was like drained of blood, and then had been all washed up. Now, was there ever a criminal profile done on the killer?
I'm sure there were many, and the general consensus was that it was a man, that it was probably a doctor, and it was somebody who was very, very sick. There were the fact that the body wasn't just placed there, but it was sort of displayed. He was trying to make a point, and there were obvious. The body was nude. There were obvious, and had been mutilated, and she had been tortured before this. So there were some very strong psychosexual overtones too. Oh,
there was. Was she ever sexually? Oh well, they wouldn't have known. I mean, they didn't even. Did they check that she was sexually assaulted?
I honestly don't remember that. I do know that she was horribly, tortured in just awful ways.
She was? Now I never read that.
Yeah, and a lot of this took place before she died.
Oh my gosh, really?
It was, it was the worst case to date at the time, and it's probably been one of the worst killings ever in Los Angeles. Okay,
so yes, you're right, because I'm reading my notes. Her face had been slashed from the corners of her mouth from ear to ear.
Yeah, it made this sort of gruesome, sickening grin on her face, which would be something that Steve Hodel would find very interesting later, because he was able to tie a lot of what happened to the body to artwork and photography that his father collected. And among the many ways that Steve Hodel is trying to make the case is that his father used his photography, some Man Ray photos, art collection, as sort of a guide for ways to abuse this body.
Mm-hmm. Also, let's see, she had several cuts on her thigh and breast, and portions of her flesh have been sliced away.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Oh my goodness! Well, how did she come about being nicknamed the Black Dahlia?
There's a number of theories. I think the best one, there was a newspaper reporter. In those days, every killer got a name, and there had been a popular movie called The Blue Dahlia at the time, and this reporter came up with the moniker the Black Dahlia, and it stuck.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've read several different theories as to how she got that name. They said that this is what I discovered, the cause of death was determined to be hemorrhaging from the lacerations to her face and shock from blows to her head and face.
Yes, she didn't die all at once. Clearly she was killed somewhere else and then brought to this location and then displayed there to be found.
Let's see her, and now she ended up in being buried in Oakland because her mother lived in Oakland. Or yeah, did her mother lived in Oakland, right?
Yeah, I think they moved west. The father had lived up there, and there was this family connection. That's why she ended up there.
Mm-hmm. Anything else going on with Steve Hodel and his father being accused of being the murderer? And his name was George Hill Hodel.
George Hill Hodel. No, the police department, much to Steve's consternation, refuses to pursue this case. He keeps, despite all of his connections, being a homicide detective himself, the general consensus, and this is something we'll see in a couple of cases we talk about tonight, is it's just too old. Nobody cares. What's the point?
Nobody cares. Is he kidding?
Well, yeah, that they've got 50 other murders this year they have to worry about. So what's the point of trying to dig up a case that's over 50 years old when everybody involved, minus the kids, are dead, and so there's nobody to arrest anyway.
Oh, that's real. I know. I had sent him several years ago. I tried to because he couldn't come on that one time. We still went ahead and did the show on the Black Dahlia, and then several years ago I had sent him a message because I still had his email, and I said, Steve, would you please come on the show and talk about the case? And he said no. He said, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, he makes a very, very, this will become relevant when we talk about the Zodiac killer. He makes a really powerful case in his books that his father did. I think the big blockbuster, and it might be in his second book, is that the police actually at the time suspected George Hodel of being the killer, and they even bugged his house, and they have what Steve believes to be basically incriminating statements that his father made while police were listening to him, and that the police might have even heard Elizabeth Short being thumped over the head in the basement of George Hill's house. It's speculation, but he was very clearly, in a way that had never been revealed before, very clearly probably the suspect in the case, and they just, through a lot of reasons that Steve believes relates to corruption and internal politics, never actually charged his father.
That's too bad. That's too bad because the public is interested in this case. Doesn't Steve realize that?
Steve realizes it, and he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing, and the police department just will not go along with it.
Were there any other suspects in her murder?
There were a number, but none that really rose, in my opinion, to the level of George Hodel. I think, and one of the prosecutors in Los Angeles, after he retired, looked at the case and basically said, if given what you have dug up to date, I would file charges against him today. Wow.
That is really interesting. Did you read Steve's book?
Yeah, I read several of his books, and it's fascinating. We don't have time to talk about it tonight, but his father was a very, very interesting figure, and it was a very interesting time in Los Angeles history. He does a wonderful job, Black Dahlia Avenger, the first book, and of sort of describing what the world was like then. The police department, very, very corrupt, quite incompetent by today's standards, didn't have a lot of the scientific advances in police work that we have now. Reporters are literally trampling over the crime scene. One reason Hodel probably wasn't arrested was because, of corruption in the police department, perhaps payoffs and things like that. So he really paints this interesting noirish picture of post-war Los Angeles.
Wow. Yeah. So is there anything else you can add to that case, Michael?
No, I think the big mystery now is why they just don't officially reopen it and then officially close it. I have not seen any sort of credible explanation for that.
All right, so the next one, let's talk about this. I've done a show previously on this, but I love this one. This one's the Zodiac. Let's do the Zodiac killer.
Sure. This is another one of those famous California cases. This one primarily taking place in the Bay Area. And the setting is the late 60s, early 70s, sort of set against the counterculture time in San Francisco. And this involved a serial killer who preyed, at least initially, on couples, young couples in lovers' lanes, attacking them, killing them, most of them. Eventually, he also killed a taxi driver and may have killed many other people as far away as Riverside, California, Southern California. And like the Dahlia killer, the Zodiac killer taunted police, sent these sort of ciphers to newspapers, several Bay Area newspapers, things that had to be decoded. And one of them finally was, and it basically was taunting police, taking credit for the killings. Other communication went to the newspapers that proved it was him and at least some of these things. So again, it was one of these things where somebody committed these crimes rather brazenly. Again, sort of sexual overtones to the crimes because these were couples. They were probably making out at the time. And that he was playing this cat and mouse game with police. The twist was that he would write in these codes and these ciphers, and several of them have yet to be decoded to this day. And like the Black Dahlia, one day it just all stopped. And the killings apparently stopped, and the taunting stopped, and the ciphers stopped, and the case has gone unsolved all these years later.
Actually, Paul Stein was, I believe, the last one to be killed. He was
the cab driver, yes.
Yes, he was a cab driver in San Francisco. And actually, there was a witness. There were teenage boys who had seen...
Well, yeah, there was worse than teenage boys. There was a couple of cops who saw him, allegedly.
Yes.
Like the Dahlia case, this was not the greatest police work initially. And you're right, Paul Stein, he was in the Presidio section of San Francisco, and he gets, I think, shot by the Zodiac killer. And a 911 call goes, I don't know if it was 911 at the time, but a call went to police. Initially, it was put out as looking for a black youth. That was quickly, quickly corrected. And then a couple of cops, one a veteran cop and his partner was a rookie at the time, are responding to the scene. They see this white guy who's in his late 30s, perhaps early 40s, very casually walking down the street. And they say, hey, have you seen anybody crazy, anybody interesting? And the guy said, no. I don't know, I think he said, look over there. And the cops went on their way trying to find the Zodiac killer, or the killer, and it turns out that probably that guy, that witness, that mild-mannered witness, was the Zodiac killer, much to the embarrassment of San Francisco.
Yes, that's what yes.
Yeah, and it was a big scandal, and you know, it was a real black eye for the police department. There's really some strong signs that the cop lied about what was said and what wasn't said to this guy, but at the end of the day, they were able to get a composite sketch from the police and from these teenagers who also saw the suspect, and they had a pretty good drawing of the guy.
How did he get the name Zodiac Killer?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was wasn't it part of the taunting letters to the...
Oh, I think, yes, I think it was the symbols that he had used.
A lot of all this sort of symbol, all these symbols, and I think one of them, referenced the Zodiac. He eventually became famous for this sort of bullseye-looking, if you look it up on the internet, this sort of bullseye-looking symbol that he used as his signature.
Yes, then that's how, because he was using these letters and the cryptograms, which now I actually interviewed when I did the show on the Zodiac. I actually interviewed Daryl Lathers. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
No.
Well, he
No.
was quite involved in this case, and on the show, he told me that he actually deciphered 2 of those letters. And the saddest thing about that, I know he sent me 4 letters. And 2 of them that he had deciphered, and the computer that those letters were on crashed, and I no longer have those letters. I still have Daryl's phone number, but he's really, really old.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can get that anymore. If I ever do another show on the Zodiac, I would love to get a hold of those deciphers that he did. He had talked about the school teacher that had deciphered one of the letters.
The first one, yeah.
But
yeah.
he on the show, he questioned that teacher. So I can't remember what he said about that. Okay, let me get my notes here. Let's go through the victims.
Yeah.
The
first 2. Yeah, I mean, you haven't. You can look them up. The first 2, they were this teenage couple. There were David was a Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, and they were. One was 17, one was 16. I think they were parked in a lover's lane type area.
They were going to go to a Christmas concert at Hogan High School, and it was 3 blocks away from Betty Lou's home. And I guess they decided not to go, and they took a little detour. And actually, Lake Herman Road isn't that far from me.
Right. What's it called? Benicia? Is that?
Yeah. Well, it's in the town of Benicia, but it's also borderline Vallejo.
Okay.
And so
that was one. Well, one of them. I think they were shot. I believe those were the ones that were killed. It was in 1968. It was in December. It was like right around Christmas, I think.
Right, December 20th.
Yeah, and they wasn't known as the Zodiac killer at the time.
No.
But that was the first officially linked. Now there were later people went back and talked about a couple, and I think it's another couple in Gaviota in 63, a woman in Riverside in 66.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about those. Those are suspected.
Suspected,
yes.
Yeah.
But let's go
this
through
was the first one, and I think through the correspondence with the Chronicle and the other newspapers was tied directly to the Zodiac killer.
So back with this couple here, this Betty Lou and David, they're assuming that the killer walked up to the car. It was a Rambler. They're calling it a Rambler car. I don't know. It doesn't look like a Rambler to me, but they've got the car right there. And he walked up to the car, and he ordered, I guess she was the first to exit the car. They're assuming he told her to get out of the car. And then when she got out of the car, that's when he shot Faraday in the head.
Right.
And then she went running, and he went after her and he gunned her down.
Right.
And that was, December 20th, 1968. Now the second attack was in July 4th of 1969, and this is Darlene Farron and Mike Magoo.
Yeah, Majo,
yes.
Yeah. And it was, I think it was the case, was under very similar circumstances, right? They were in a car. I think the killer tapped on the windshield or something. And both were shot. And Darlene, I think also, wasn't she shot as she was running away, or was shot and somehow was able to run a certain distance? And the interesting thing here is that Michael actually survived.
Yes.
And Darlene survived, I think, long enough to give certain statements in the ambulance. She ultimately died at the hospital. But again, it was under very similar circumstances. I think he was 19, she was about 22. They were in a car. It was in a park, I believe.
They were at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo.
Yeah. And so,
which is 4 miles from Lake Herman.
Exactly. So, very similar MO. We have this guy now prowling around looking for young people, in cars and then just shooting them for no particular reason. And this was the second one that was definitely linked to what would become known as Zodiac Killer.
Now, on this particular one, since Michael survived, was the Zodiac wearing the hood on his head at that time?
The white hood. I know he was with the next one, the Brian Hartnell case, which was just
you know what?
Months, where he wore like the executioner's hood.
Yeah.
And that was about 2 months later. But I don't recall whether or not, and I don't get the impression they had much of a decent description of the guy at all from because the sketch wasn't until later.
And I believe, was this the one that he wrote on the car door?
That I don't know. I know they were able, through the correspondence with the newspapers, to link him to this one as well.
Yeah, he did write. He wrote. I have a picture of a car door where he put Vallejo, and they were killed in Vallejo, so it might have been his car.
Yeah.
And he put the dates. He December 20th, 1968. He put the date of the first murder. Then July 4th, 1969, which was this one. And I'm thinking that the description of the man is what I'm showing now, and this is probably the one that he gave police.
Okay.
All right. So then the third set was Brian Calvin Hartnell
and Cecilia Shepard.
Yeah.
And this was in Napa, right? And they were not shot. In this case, it was a knife. It was a stabbing. And again, the guy survived. Brian survived. Cecilia actually died. But as I recall, it was again under very similar circumstances, right? It wasn't in a car. It was a couple in a car, a semi-remote location. So now we have this really chilling MO, and real fear now is gripping the Bay Area, that kids who are just going off and young people doing what they do can be targeted by this deranged man who's not out for money and not out to steal their cars, but just wants to kill young people while they appear to be in love.
Right. All right, so let me tell you a little synopsis about this. This happened September 27th, 1969. At Lake Berryessa. They happened to be picnicking. A man approached them wearing a black executioner's type hood with a clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes, and a bib-like device on his chest. And he had a white 3x3-inch cross circle symbol on it. He approached them with a gun, which Hartner believed to be a .45. The hooded man claimed to be an escaped convict. Here, let me show their picture again. And he claimed to be an escaped convict from Deer Lodge, Montana, where he had killed a guard and stolen a car, and he needed their car and money to go to Mexico. He brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie up Hartnell before he tied her up. The killer checked and tightened Hartnell's bounds after discovering Shepard had bound Hartnell's hands loosely. Hartnell initially believed it to be a weird robbery, but the man drew a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. The killer then hiked 50 yards back up to Knoxville Road, drew the cross circle symbol on Hartnell's car and with a black felt pen, and then he wrote beneath it. So it must have been his car that he wrote on. And then after hearing their screams for help, a man and his son who were fishing in the nearby cove discovered the victims. Now it says that Cecilia was conscious and she was providing a detailed description of the attacker. And of course she went into a coma and died, and she never had regained consciousness.
Yeah, and Brian, of course, lived and
yes.
was able to give a very deep description, which is clearly what all this is coming from.
And you know what's really weird, Michael? How come, maybe he was wearing this hood? No, he didn't, because the first one he didn't. Why do you think he started wearing this hood?
Well, I think, why is he doing any of this stuff? I think as his notoriety is gaining, he doesn't want to be recognized. And God only knows what, was going through his mind. I think the more important question is, why is he killing young people, having a good time? And this is clearly a twisted person. All I could guess is that he doesn't want to be recognized. And this is it's all part of the sort of ritualistic aspect of the killings. It's not that he's doing this because he's trying to steal money to buy drugs, or he's trying to steal a car. This is all, he's like acting out some bizarre ritual that only he understands. And the hood is probably part of whatever this with the cryptography and the symbols and the taunting of police and all this stuff. This guy is clearly marching to his own drummer.
I'm wondering if he decided to start wearing this outfit because of the first one, the first victim he didn't kill. So maybe he did this so he wouldn't be recognized anymore.
Or he did it so he would be recognized. I mean, he's got the symbols of the Zodiac, the cross thing. So it's this, and you hear about this all the time. These guys who, do they want to be caught? They don't want to be caught. It's almost like he wants them to know that he's the Zodiac killer. That this is not that this is not just some robbery. This is something more, and something more important and more meaningful in whatever twisted way this guy's thinking.
It's really bizarre. Okay, now what we can do is talk about. Let me find this now. The suspects. There are 3 suspected murder victims. Actually, 3. Now, what I find interesting is, why are they connecting Donna and Lass? She disappeared, and I don't think they ever found her body.
I don't. That one I'm not as familiar with. Is that the
one from Tahoe, I believe?
The one from Tahoe.
Yeah.
Nevada.
Yeah.
There's one in Nevada. There's State Line. There's one in Riverside. I don't remember what all the different reasons were. Certain things had the kinds of signatures and different aspects of similar aspects to the confirmed killings. What happens a lot of times in these serial killings, and what people are saying Steve Hodel is guilty of, is kind of a confirmation bias. You find a killing somewhere, and you're looking for those signatures that match the Zodiac killer. If you're looking for it, you'll find them at the exclusion of other things. So these other killings, one in 63, 66, 70, there's another one in Modesto, a woman who was with her kid in the car and somebody pulled over and tried to kill her. I think it's very hard to say whether or not they were part of the Zodiac killer. And then there you got to factor in all the weirdos who are confessing to it and sending in their own Zodiac notes, and even the lead investigator at one point was accused of potentially being, if not the killer, certainly sending in some of the notes. He was accused of sending in fan mail to himself to a newspaper, So things just really spun out of control, and it's hard to say. It's really hard to say now whether these additional victims were of the Zodiac killer.
They were just too familiar, I guess, with the Zodiac killing. Robert Dominguez, 18, and Linda Edwards, 17, they were shot and killed on June 4th in 1963. Now, if he really did that, that would be the very first one.
Right, and if he did, why did he wait 5-6 years to take credit for it?
I don't know. I know. And then, let's see, Sherry Jo Bates, 18, she was stabbed to death, nearly decapitated in October 30th of 1966 at Riverside City College in Riverside.
Right, and there were certain aspects of her case that seemed in hindsight similar, and I can't remember. I don't believe any of the correspondence the guy took any credit for these other ones.
No. And of course, Donna Lass, she just disappeared.
Yeah.
And then so they were. It was questionable about this Kathleen Johns, 22, with her and her baby. They're not sure. From what I read, they weren't sure if she was just trying to be connected to the possible Zodiac, or if the incident really did happen.
Well, I think the incident happened. Was it they had was car trouble or something?
Right.
And the guy pulled up and offered to help them, and then drove them around, and they escaped. Part of it is people are so fixated on this case. It was like with the Hillside Strangler and some other cases, and everywhere you look, you see the Zodiac killer lurking. And so then if it's just some sort of garden variety nut job who's trying to kill you or whatever, you're going to think it's the Zodiac killer. Also, I think a lot of people want it to be the Zodiac killer. They in a strange way want their crime to matter. That it wasn't just some garden variety criminal. They were actually victims of the Zodiac. So I don't know that she consciously was trying to get publicity, but certainly this is the kind of thing that was on people's minds.
Yeah. Do you know about Gary L. Stewart, who wrote the book?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. And isn't that the one where he finds... I forgot his name.
Okay.
But he links it through handwriting analysis, right?
No.
No.
Okay, can I tell you?
Yeah, please. Because there was one that has been thoroughly debunked.
Okay, well, let me tell you about this one, then you let me know what you know about it. Gary L. Stewart, he wrote the book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All. His mother told him that he was actually he had another father. So he went searching for his real father. And he found out that his real father was Earl Van Best. And somehow there were fingerprints that were lifted off of the taxi cab that had a scar on his, I guess his left index finger. And come to find out, guess what? Earl Van Best had the exact same scar on his finger. And I don't know how he came about finding any of this. Yes, and you're right also. There was a handwriting expert that also tied Best's signature on the marriage certificate.
Yeah, the marriage certificate.
Yes. So
that was okay. So that was the one I was thinking of, and the problem with that, I believe, and that was a more recent book, right, in the last couple of years.
Yes.
They later, and this is according to the detractors of this writer, they later found out that the signature, the writing on the marriage certificate was not done by him. It was done by somebody else, and so it sort of negated the whole theory. There's what you see here, and it's funny. This guy's story, this writer's story, searching for his father, and very similar to the Steve Hodel story. These men are trying to resolve these emotional issues they have, and trying to find this father they never knew, and lo and behold, Dad's the Zodiac killer. And the critics of these kinds of books, and the scar, but I think a million people have a scar like that. I mean, it's not.
You don't think it's a coincidence?
I think it's a coincidence, but I don't. I'd have to really look at the evidence. I don't think it's. I think you would probably find any kind of forensic scientist will say, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Would it really stand up in court? I don't know. Clearly, it hasn't been enough for the police department to reopen the case. I really have my doubts, because you hear this evidence, and as you start exploring it further, like with the handwriting, oh my gosh, it's the same handwriting on the marriage license, and then it turns out, well, maybe he actually didn't write it, and handwriting analysis is a subjective science at best. frankly, fingerprint analysis, if it isn't if they don't have an actual number of points to compare, is very, very subjective also. So, in my recollection, these were kind of smudged fingerprints. They weren't exactly clean fingerprints. Often in these cases, what looks like really amazing evidence really crumbles under any kind of scrutiny, and believe me, having covered a lot of trials, stuff that looks so amazingly great, DNA evidence, when challenged in court, can start falling apart very quickly.
Wow. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Now, there were several people that were checked out to be the possible Zodiac killer. One was Richard Gauskowski. Do you know about him?
No. The one that I'm most fascinated with, frankly, is George Hill Hodel, and that's the one I've been researching the most, because Steve Hodel took one step further and decided that Dad was not just the Black Dahlia killer, but was also the Zodiac killer, and has now written 2 books.
So he's claiming that his father could have been the Zodiac, but how old was the father?
Well, that is problem number 1. Most of the descriptions put the Zodiac killer late 30s, perhaps early 40s.
Yeah.
His father was about 10 or 20 years older than that. But if you look at, and again, it's confirmation bias, you could probably find a photo of me that looks like the sketch, but Steve Hodel found a picture of his father from 1968, put it right next to 69, and put it right next to the composite sketch, and it is chillingly similar. His dad was very young looking for his age. Now, I think he had glasses to the Zodiac. I mean, a lot of people look like that. But Hodel, and this is where he may have kind of gone off the rails a little bit, but it's a fascinating couple of books. His strongest evidence is the Zodiac killer sent a Halloween card, and on the Halloween card was a new kind of a symbol, and it's like straight lines. I can't really describe it. You can look it up.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, and it was apparently some kind of a Celtic language, an ancient Celtic language, and and Hodel, just out of the blue, got a letter from some guy who studies this stuff. One translation of the symbol are the letters HODEL, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Also looks like the symbol for the rock group Van Halen in my mind, but who knows. And Hodel has spent a lot of time in recent years trying to make the case that his father was also the Zodiac killer. And he finds other points similar, the taunting, the sending stuff to the newspapers. George Hodel worked at the Chronicle as a young man, has ties to the Chronicle, could have been there at the same time. So it's very similar to the other gentleman's book about thinking his father he never really knew could have been the Zodiac killer, and Hodel's trying to make the same case. And how much of it is true and how much of it is driven by these men and these sort of their own psychological needs to have a father who was never really there for them, and to fill that need, Dad has to be a serial killer. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so how about we go to okay, how about we do the Highway of Tears?
Yeah, Highway of Tears, it's kind of doesn't almost fit the theme of these other killings, because it's the Highway of Tears, Highway 16. It's northern British Columbia. It's a very rural, remote area filled with indigenous population, a lot of poverty. And this is a road, it's about 400 miles long, runs east-west, and from the late 60s till practically now, a lot of people, and many of them women, have been killed or just disappeared along this road, and all of them are unsolved. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I think, lists 9 official murders. The people who live there say it's probably closer to 40 to 60. And many of them are women, many of them Aboriginal, many of them teenagers, many of them hitchhiking or somehow standing around on the side of the road. And what's really sad about this is the just awful job that the police up there have done investigating these things. This is a kind of a marginalized population. They're poor. They don't have lawyers. A lot of them have drug problems, alcohol problems. A couple of prostitutes were part of this group. And it's a huge, huge scandal in Canada, and a real black eye on the mounted police for not, spending more time and attention to these things. There was a guy who was sort of a suspect in several of them. His DNA was found, I think, on one of the bodies, but then he was also in jail at the time that some of the other ones happened. So, I don't think you can reasonably say a serial killer is that necessarily work, although within all this, there might have been 1 or even 2 serial killers driving around up there killing all these women.
The ones that disappeared, let's see. I have a list of the 19 murders.
Yeah, there's a bunch. There's a really good Vice News did a video just in the last year or two about it. And it's heartbreaking because it's nobody cares about these women, and they have no voice. The families have no voice. No one's listening to them. Nobody cares that they disappeared and died. Well,
like you said, aren't they mostly poor, and
yeah.
They're part of the American Indians?
Yeah. I mean, it's Canada, so they use the term indigenous or aboriginal.
Right.
But yeah, they're Indian. They're people who are disenfranchised and poor, and they've cut back finances to the department, the task force that was investigating them, and it became, people started looking into it more deeply, and then there were signs that official emails had been deleted so that the press couldn't find out just how bad the department had done.
Yeah.
It's a real shame. Is there in all those killings somebody who went around killing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women? Yeah, probably. It would have been very easy to get away with. I think we're looking at the work of multiple killers, and nobody ever arrested. Even the guy whose DNA they found, they never actually arrested him.
Yeah, what was why did they do that? It was a big British Columbia government email scandal. Why did they do that?
Because they were trying, as best I could tell, they were trying to cover up the fact that they were doing such a lousy job caring about these people. And so they deleted the emails.
Oh my goodness. And there was accusations of racism?
Yeah, very clearly. Because these are indigenous people, they did not get the same attention that, upper middle class white people. I mean, you could imagine if there was a street in downtown, Calgary, that they would, and 19 people died, they'd be going crazy. I mean, the other cases we talked about, we're talking about 5, 6, 7 people killed. Here, we're talking dozens and dozens of people killed, and nobody seemed to care.
Yeah, what a shame. They have from what I understand, they have a project, an EPANA project, which is focused on solving these murders, but I don't know and that was in 2005.
Yeah, they formed this task force, but then their funding is, not been sufficient, and it really reflects badly on the government and the department up there.
Let's see. And with the 6 that were missing, I guess they never even found their bodies or any parts or bones or anything?
No, they never found, and I'm not sure how hard they looked.
Oh, that's such a shame. And all these girls were hitchhiking on Highway 16.
Yeah, it's part of, they don't have cars because they don't have money. There's no good bus service or anything around there. There's no public facilities. So these girls, and a lot of these were in the late 60s, early 70s too, and they would just be hitchhiking.
What a shame. That's a shame. Anything else you could say about those highway?
No, it's not. It's more of a social issue than true crime. It's kind of transcended even that, because there's so little to talk about the cases because they were so poorly investigated.
That's horrible. I feel so bad for those people. Now, I know they put up signs, no hitchhiking. I wonder if they're still doing that. I guess they have no choice.
You'll find signs along the highway. Big billboards. Be careful and don't hitchhike and this and that. I mean, yeah. Instead of actively investigating what could be 50 murders, they put up a couple billboards.
Is there any more news, I wonder? I haven't read anything updated whether these murders are continuing or not.
I think the last one, if I'm not mistaken, the last official one is like 2011, 2012.
Let's see what my notes say. 2011.
Yeah.
But she went missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 2010 was the last official murder.
I think what you see now is a lot of talk about, reforming the department and trying to get people to actually do something about all this.
All right, on to the next one. The town that dreaded sundown.
Yeah, the Texarkana Moonlight murders. The Phantom murders, the Phantom killers, sometimes called. This, a lot of the facts about this are not true and have been sort of become legend. These were a series of very sort of Zodiac killer-like attacks on couples in this town called Texarkana. I think it straddles Texas and Arkansas. It took place right around the same time as the Black Dahlia. It was 1946. This 10-week period in which at least 8 people were attacked. They were all couples, 4 couples, and 5 of them were killed. They all happened at night, and that's why they were called the Moonlight murders. Initially, people said he only killed on full moons. That was not true. They were all different parts of the moon. But it did happen at night, and it so terrorized this town that people were afraid to go out at night. People were buying guns. They were boarding up their houses. And like the Black Dahlia, one day they just stopped. The murders have never been officially solved. There's a book out now, just about a year ago. A guy makes a pretty decent case that one guy might have been the killer. We can talk about that in a second, but he was never actually arrested. But it very clearly looked like the work of a serial killer, although as you start examining, particularly the first pair and the last pair, might have been somebody else with a copycat in between. So it could only have been attacks on 2 couples.
Oh, really? All right, so let's talk about the first attack then. So the first known attack from this phantom killer took place on February 22nd of 1946 in a secluded Lover's Lane.
Yeah, Jimmy Hollis, and I think her name was Mary Larry. I don't know how that's pronounced.
Yeah.
But they were in a car, and I think the killer approached them, and if I'm not mistaken, he made Jimmy drop his pants, and things got violent. A blunt object was used to hit them. I think
a flashlight, wasn't it? Was it a flashlight?
It could have been, although I think
a pistol.
Somebody thought it was a pistol. They were pistol whipped, and then somebody else, one of them, Jimmy survived, thought it might have been a pipe. The flashlight played, I think, later in the thing. In any event, they might have been pistol whipped, might have been hit by a pipe, might have been both. Jimmy survived, and this one, and this is why I was getting confused with Zodiac. He apparently wore a white mask of some sort. Initially, thought he might have been black because his voice sounded like that, according to the victim. But this is what sort of started this kind of this 2 months of terror.
Yes, they said that he told her she started running.
Yeah.
And he caught up to her, and actually she stated she had heard Hollis groaning, and then
Right.
the man continued to beat and stomp him, and then she went off running. She was knocked down. She was assaulted, but she said she wasn't, but they later found out that she was sexually assaulted with an instrument, and he terribly abused her, and they said she managed to get up and run away. Believing she was still being chased, she ran for about a half a mile to the nearest buildings and woke up residents. So she survived, huh?
Yeah, and then I think he died, right? Jimmy died, I think.
Yeah. I think he crushed his skull. Then, then the second attack was March 24th of 1946, and it was Richard Griffin.
Yeah, Polly-Ann Moore.
And she was 17.
Yeah, and I don't know how old Richard was. But this
29.
was, again, it was a car. I think it was parked near a nightclub outside of town. And in this case, weren't they both, I believe they were both shot.
Yeah.
A gun was used. There was some indication again that Richard had to take his pants off at some point during the attack. And their bodies were later found.
They were found in the inside his car.
Right.
Let's see. Griffin was found between the front seats on his knees with his head resting on his crossed hands, and his pockets were turned inside out. And he was 29.
I think her purse was not stolen, though. That's what was sort of odd about it.
Well, she was found sprawled face down in the back seat. Griffin had been shot twice while still in the car, and both had been shot once in the back of the head, and they were both fully clothed. According to the police report, Moore was killed on a blanket in front of the vehicle before being placed back inside. Now, how did they know that? But because of the chaos on the spot, her body was taken to the morgue before examination could be determined if she actually had been sexually assaulted.
Yeah, and a lot of that I don't believe. This was a small town in Arkansas in the 40s, and it would have been very, very taboo to talk about sexual assault.
Yes.
And clearly, like with Dahlia, there was some very bad police work going on, and it's very hard. It's funny because I read several different versions of these accounts, and I see different descriptions of what happened and what they think. Even the theories are all sort of muddled.
Yeah, you're right. They didn't talk about that in those days.
Yeah, so whether, would they have done and then of course they don't have the whole protocol and a rape kit and all that sort of stuff. So, forensic science was not nearly as advanced. And, we're not dealing with a very professional police department either.
No. All right, okay, so the third attack.
Yeah, the two teenagers.
Let's see.
Now, this was Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker.
Right.
Betty Jo's only 15 years old. She was actually playing sax, doing a gig at the VFW Hall. And Paul was, I don't think they were, lovers or kids. I think he was a longtime friend, and wasn't he picking her up? Yeah,
he was picking her up. She was there. Evidently, she was going to a slumber party across town. Now, Paul was 16.
And their bodies, and she was playing very late. It was still like 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning or something. And what's interesting here is that their bodies were found several miles apart from each other. They've both been shot, And by the way, it was a .32 caliber, the same caliber that was used on Griffin and Moore. And I think she was shot, like, her body rather was found about 3 miles away from his body, and his body was found a long ways away from his car. It might have been a mile or two away from his car. This all comes into play when they find this potential suspect. But somehow this Moonlight killer, Phantom killer, the Phantom Slayer is getting around. He's got some kind of a vehicle because he's able to find these people out in these remote, somewhat remote areas, and in this case, driving them all over the place.
Yeah. According to, she was found 2 miles away, lying on her back, fully clothed, and her coat was buttoned, and her right hand was in the pocket, and she was shot twice. He was found lying on his left side by the road, which I showed the picture of, poor thing, and he was shot 4 times. Blood was found further down on the other side of the road by a fence. Now, I don't know if he was shot there and then put over here. Who knows? And then the weapon that was used, you were right, it was a .32 automatic. And the reports, the reports of Betty said that she was raped. But, again, they said that was really hard to verify. And Paul's car was found about 3 miles away from her body and 1.5 miles away from his body. So the murderer dragged their bodies. Now, why would he do that? Why would the murderer do that?
Well, I think that's what, yeah, it's very bizarre, because the other ones, the bodies were left, or they occurred, the ones who died were left basically where it happened. So now why is he, why is he dumping these people miles and miles away and going? I mean, none of it made a lot of sense.
Okay, now there was a 4th attack.
Yeah, this was the one that they're really uncertain was this guy. It was a couple, but this was an older couple. I think this guy is Virgil Starks and his wife Katie Starks, and I think he was a farmer. Basically, Virgil was sitting at home at night reading the newspaper, and he gets shot through the window in the head.
Yes.
And then his wife, she used an old crank phone, and the wife Katie was literally calling the police, calling for help when she gets shot through the same window. And she's actually shot twice in the head, but she survives. And I think this is where the flashlight came into play. I think somebody thought they saw somebody or maybe they found a flashlight nearby. There was no fingerprints on it that they could use. This was one. It happened 10 weeks or so after the first one, during this very, very at the peak of the terror and fear in this town. And it was a couple. They were shot. I believe it was a .45 that shot them, not a .32. So it was a different gun, different MO. And if I'm remembering this correctly, police suspected one of them, and I can't remember if it was Katie or one of them. Might have been. I can't remember which one it was, but police basically implied that she knew who had done it and wasn't fessing up.
Oh.
And so this is one, like the first one, there have been some question marks about whether it was the same person. The two, they're pretty sure were the same because the link with the gun. This one, it is a copycat. It's totally unrelated, with the only similarity being it was a couple being killed at night in Texarkana.
And again, this was a Zodiac type killing.
Yeah, when you talk about the rape and the bodies being found and positioned, and there's something else going on here. There's some reason this person is seeking out couples, in the first few cases, young couples, and it has many parallels with the Zodiac case 20 years later.
Now I'm wondering. Now you know what? I also have. They were talking about strong psychological differences between the two killers. the Zodiac and this Phantom Killer. With the Zodiac, he was concentrating on his attacks on women and making sure the men were dead. And go ahead.
Yeah, I think the big difference is the Zodiac killer and the Black Dahlia killer. There was this sort of ego at work, a narcissism, that it wasn't enough just to kill people, but he wanted credit for it. He wanted the notoriety for it. And at great risk to himself, contacted newspapers and, bragged about his work. That he didn't get enough of a thrill just killing these people. He needed this sort of extra thrill. Whereas in these Texarkana cases, and again, whether these four couples or even all the work of a similar person, there was never any indication that this person wanted credit for it or was mocking the cops. So you're so dumb you couldn't kill me and catch me, and they did abruptly end with the Starks case.
Now I know I have a picture of that fella that they had suspected.
Ul Sweeney.
Yeah.
And this is the recent book, which I think is called Phantom Killer. Tries to make the case that this guy was the killer. I don't quite remember what his background was, but as police looked into it, what they found was that on the nights of each one of these killings, a car was stolen. And so then they started looking into stolen car cases. And in one of the cases, and I can't remember which one, I think it was, I can't remember which one it was, they were led to Ul Sweeney, as the guy who stole a car on the same night as one of the killings. And when they arrested him, he allegedly said something to the effect of, you got me for more than a stolen car. Believe me, you got me for a lot more than that. He owned, allegedly, a .32 caliber gun, and they went through his laundry, I think, and they put a black light on a khaki work shirt, and up popped what they said were the letters STARK. So whether he had somehow stolen this guy's shirt or whatever, wrote the name on there. So there was quite a bit of circumstantial evidence that he did it. There's some other admissions he might have made to, I think, his wife or girlfriend or something. But they never actually arrested him for these killings. There were some partial fingerprints that were collected, and none of them matched him. And police were really not convinced that Ul was the guy. Now, all these years later, an author seems to think he is.
Wow. They also brought in mounted police for this case, didn't they?
Yeah, they brought it was Texas Rangers, actually.
Yeah, Texas Rangers.
Yeah, and there was a very infamous, I forgot his name, Lone Wolf, what's his name?
Yeah.
A very famous Texas Ranger. He vowed never to leave Texarkana until he solved the case. Of course, he never did. There was a second, even more tenuous suspect, a guy named Duty Tennyson. He was a freshman at the University of Arkansas, and one day Duty killed himself, took some poison. And as they were going through his stuff, they found a note in which he confessed to these killings. And I may not be, I think I'm correct on this, I believe Duty not only was the same age as Booker, the young saxophone player, but he went to the same high school and actually even played the trombone in the band, either with her or at some point close to her. So there was some connection between this kid and obviously very troubled young man. He died. There was no other evidence tying him, and he wrote a lot of crazy stuff. That wasn't the only thing in the suicide note. There were several notes found, and he was confessing to all kinds of things and making all kinds of statements. But he was another very strong suspect at the time.
Wow. It's amazing that they don't catch any of these guys. Of course, in those days too, it probably was a lot harder to try and catch a serial killer.
Yeah, it's difficult because they didn't have DNA. Serology was in its infancy. There was no national database of fingerprints. The whole science of fingerprint analysis was not as advanced. These are now, Zodiac was certainly later in a much more professional police department, but it sort of speaks to the fact that if you're somewhat smart and you want to get away with murder, and if you murder for no kind of normal reason, quote unquote, you're not mad at your wife for screwing around, or you're not killing a rival drug dealer, or you're not robbing a liquor store and cleaning them out. If you have no reason, if it's random, you're just picking these people because they're couples, you can get away with murder if you're careful enough. It is very hard to do. Most people kill people for a particular reason that's pretty easy to trace, and they either need money or drugs or revenge or whatever. But if you're just doing it for some kind of more elusive reason, psychological, psychosexual reasons, it's very hard to solve. And then you add in the fact that some of these were happened 60 years ago, and issues in various departments, you can get away with murder.
Wow. You know what? We have time. I want to ask you, I don't know if my viewers are interested, but I'm really curious about the O.J. Simpson.
Oh, yeah, I covered that trial.
Yes. Tell the viewers about that.
Well, I was working at AP at the time in the Los Angeles Bureau, and we got a bulletin from the police department that 2 people had been killed on Bundy Drive in Brentwood, near Wilshire Boulevard. And those of us who live out here know that that's a pretty upscale part of town. Doesn't happen very much. We ran a very quick property search. It was 894 Bundy. We ran a property search on the address, came back Nicole Brown Simpson. We ran her name through, this was pre-internet, but we had kind of our own archives at AP. Up popped the fact that she was O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, that they had a somewhat contentious divorce. And so we sent somebody out to the scene, and by the time they got there, we heard about the second crime scene, Rockingham, where Simpson lived. And that started, 2 years of me writing 1 to 5 stories a day about this case. I covered, my partner Linda Deutsch and I covered both the trials. There was a civil trial afterwards. I covered all the investigation leading up to it, and sat there in court every day.
Wow. I remember coming home from work, and they would repeat the playback of what had happened. Oh my God, I saw the whole darn trial. I saw everything. And I was at work the day that they were going to give the verdict out, and they let us go to one of the classrooms and watch the TV.
Yeah, I sat.
Oh my God. That
was a lot more boring in person, but
boring? Oh my God, I found it fascinating.
Well, you weren't sitting on a wood bench for 8 straight hours.
Oh no, I would have been.
Argue. Yeah.
Oh Michael, I would have been fascinated to be there. Oh my God, and the part about the blood, the bloody glove. Well, come on, it's probably shrunk because it got wet, right?
Yeah, and there's the police in this one. They had their problems in OJ, but they did some amazing police work linking the glove to OJ. He bought it. They found the guy who sold them the gloves. They had his credit card, the exact same model of glove. I think, they brought the guy into court. He bought it in New York. So they were able to do all that stuff. But I think, and this is what the People versus OJ, the miniseries does so well, is you have to understand this happened 2 years after the riots in Los Angeles, after the Rodney King acquittal of the police that beat the hell out of him on videotape, and then they acquitted these white cops and for beating up a black guy. The city had 3 days of rioting, and then about 2 years, year and a half, 2 years later, O.J. Simpson is arrested. Imagine if LeBron James was arrested today in Ferguson, Missouri, and it was going to be a jury of 9 black people drawn from Ferguson, sitting in judgment of an African American icon. It was incendiary. And weirdly, Johnny Cochran was the only one at first who understood that. The prosecution totally did not. Marcia Clark completely did not understand the environment. And LAPD under Daryl Gates, Chief Gates, very, very antagonistic relationship with the black community, South Central, and that officers like Mark Furman were very well known to folks there, and planting evidence and abusing people and lying on the stand, and a lot of the stuff that's in the headlines today was going on then. So I think it was just payback, and it really didn't matter what evidence they came up with, and the jury just needed some reason, some vague reason to acquit him, and that the glove stunt provided more than ample reason.
Did they ask him why he would? Because they showed him in his white van running. What was he running from?
Well, initially, I don't think he entirely knew. It was his pal, A.C. Cowlings, who was driving. Initially, he was driving from L.A., where he lived, Brentwood, to Orange County, where Nicole was buried. And I think he went to the grave first. There was some thought he was going to go to Mexico, because her grave is about 70 miles away from the border. He was suicidal. He was mixed up. He was a mess. They turn around. They come back to L.A.
Yeah, because I remember seeing on the news the cameras were following him. They wanted him to stop, but he wouldn't stop. He just kept going.
Right, and they didn't want to shoot him. I mean, he's O.J. Simpson, and don't forget he played for USC. He was a hero in Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, he was. And you were in the courtroom when her family was there, Mr. Goldman, Mrs. Goldman, and the sisters. That must have been.
The ties go even deeper. It's just weird that it happened. I grew up in near Dana Point, California, and I went to Dana Hills High School. It's the same high school. I went to high school at the same time as Nicole Brown went to high school. We went to the same high school, Dana Hills High School. She was a senior and I was a freshman, and her sisters went to high school with me and my sister. The family lived very close to our house.
Oh my God. Well, you had a piece of history that, it was horrible, and but you were there to witness all that.
Yeah, it was amazing, and a lot of us. It was, in some ways, there was a lot of PTSD after covering something like that, to be that close to something that huge. And a lot of us certainly reporters have kind of shied away from talking about it or doing anything about it or writing about it. And I was very reluctant to watch the miniseries because it's like, oh my gosh, it was like going back 20 years. But they've done an amazing job. They really, I know just about all those people personally, and knew them before. Marcia Clark, Chris Darden, they were just regular prosecutors. Gil Garcetti, Johnny Cochran. I covered the Michael Jackson child molestation case, and Johnny was his lawyer before O.J. So I knew all these people before, and they're doing, if anyone is wondering, they're doing a very, very good job with this miniseries. I've been amazed.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it only because I had seen the whole thing, the real trial, day by day, every day. I sat there and watched the whole thing. So I really didn't care about watching that miniseries.
Yeah.
And so, do you want to express your opinion as to what you think happened?
What I think happened? Well, I think there was plenty there to convict him. I've never covered a case with that much incriminating evidence, and a different jury at a different time would have convicted him. And right after this, he had a civil trial. It wasn't on TV, so people don't know about it. But I covered that, and 12 people unanimously voted to hold him responsible for the deaths using basically the same evidence. So do I have a theory of what happened? I think I think the prosecution made a very, very good case. He was still obsessed with
Nicole,
his ex-wife, and he couldn't let her go. And everyone forgets at the time he was filming a show called Frogmen, in which he used knives and dressed up in basically the way he allegedly dressed up this night, and it was probably stalking her, and saw this young guy, Ron Goldman, who was a waiter for her earlier that night at a nice restaurant, come by, to bring, I think it was sunglasses or something. It was late at night, and it was probably, how often does your waiter come to your house in the middle of the night, with your sunglasses? And there were candles burning in there. I think it was pretty obvious what she was hoping was going to happen. And OJ, according to the prosecution theory, and they did a pretty good job proving it, saw all this and freaked, and whether he went there just to scare her, and that's why he had the knife and the whole Frogman, the whole dark outfit and the cap and the gloves and all that stuff, I don't know. I don't, or did he mean to kill? I think Ron Goldman ended up at the wrong place at the wrong time under no matter what theory you have.
Exactly.
And OJ certainly acted like a guilty man right afterwards, and it wasn't until Johnny Cochran and company got on board that he started finding some reason why he wasn't guilty. And it's weird with Simpson, it's a dichotomy there. He grew up very poor, San Francisco, right, hometown, and grew up in the projects and didn't know his father. I think his father died of AIDS, and was raised by a mom and single mom, and then he became this brand, O.J. Simpson, Hertz pitchman and comic actor, and he did Monday Night Football, sports announcing, and he always kind of looked at O.J. as like this separate entity, this like brand, this thing, whereas there was poor Arenthal from the projects, and then O.J. this creation of his, and and Jeff Toobin, who wrote the book on which the thing is based, kind of makes this case that O.J. Arenthal raised his ugly head all of now and then, and it was the part of him that he was always trying to suppress and forget, and it came back in a really, really bad way. And so, yes, O.J. didn't do it, because O.J. is the amiable pitchman, but maybe Arenthal did.
I want to ask you, did you follow the Casey Anthony case?
Yes, I wrote about it for People magazine.
Why didn't you tell me that? You can't keep things from me, Michael.
Yeah, I covered it remotely. I covered it from Los Angeles because remember it was on TV, so I covered it off TV.
Oh my God, I watched that one too. I never. All right, so tell me your thoughts on that case.
I gotta tell you, I haven't thought about it in a long time. I just came off a book, and so my mind is completely consumed with another case. It's obviously an apparent gross injustice, and she got away with one, and I'm not really sure how that happened, but weird things seem to happen in Florida.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it was pretty clear. I mean, to all of us that were watching that case, that she did it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well,
bring me back. I can go back and read my old stories.
Oh.
But if you Google my name and people.com, you'll see.
Oh yeah, you've written 10 books?
Yeah.
And I was going to post them on the show tonight and show everybody, but you had 10 books. I didn't have a shot big enough for 10 books.
Well, they're still all on Amazon, so if you put in my last name, I'm the only Michael Fleeman in Amazon. And just a little plug, I have a website called truecrimepage.com, or you can reach me like you do on my True Crime Page Facebook page. So I love hearing from people on Facebook too.
Oh yeah. Hey, what's the last book you've written now?
It's called Crazy for You. It came out recently. It's about a woman named Andrea Sneiderman in Atlanta. You may have heard about this. The Rusty Sneiderman. He was a dad who had just dropped his kid off at daycare and got gunned down in the parking lot. And they find the guy who shot him, and it turned out to be the boss of his wife. And there were strong indications that the boss and the wife were having an affair, and that she put her boss up to killing the husband, get him out of the way. The boss was convicted. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, thus the title, Crazy for You. He said, among many other things, that angels appeared and told him to kill Rusty Sneiderman. He had some kind of bizarre feeling that if Rusty got out of the way, he could then marry his employee, Andrea. There was a lot of evidence that they had had an affair for about a year, receipts and hotels and wine and all this sort of stuff. And Andrea denied they had an affair, denied that she put him up to killing her husband, insisted that he just went off and did this on his own. And she was going to be tried in a separate trial for murder. At the last minute, the prosecution changed the charges, dropped the murder charges, and they actually convicted her of perjury for lying about the affair at the boss's trial. And she spent time, well, the only people I've ever seen convicted of perjury, spent several months in prison on a perjury charge. She's now out. And I believe the appeals court's going to give a new trial to the boss.
Wow. Are you interested in unsolved murders? Unsolved mysterious murders?
Yeah, I mean, I don't write about them because from a book standpoint, well, they want an ending. The readers want an ending. And if the ending is, well, and we don't know who did it, it's not satisfying.
Oh, it is to me.
Yeah.
We love that.
Well, unfortunately, not to my publisher.
Oh.
He wants a nice, tidy ending. So all the ones I've written about have ended one way or the other. Now, a couple of them, I've written 2 or 3, in which the verdicts were overturned on technical grounds. But, I don't get into the unsolved for that reason, that, the readers seem to want a beginning, middle, and end. They want some kind of resolution, justice to have been done, want to feel good about the system. I mean, the fun thing about an unsolved, fun and not fun, is that, they can take on, you can start fantasizing, you can start fictionalizing, you can start filling in the gaps yourself. And in some ways, they are more interesting. We're still talking about Jack the Ripper.
Oh, I know.
It's still because you can project, and you can, James Ellroy wrote a whole book, Black Dahlia, and invented all these characters and the whole thing. The fundamental aspects of the case are the same, but you can make up all the other stuff. You can make up an even more interesting case than maybe even what it really is. A lot of murder is very, like evil, very banal, and people kill for really stupid, uninteresting reasons. And when it's unsolved, you can make those reasons much more interesting.
On that Peterson case, I watched that whole trial as well.
Yeah.
And my heart, I knew he was guilty, but when I watched that trial, I saw no real evidence that could convict him of killing her.
You see this, and again, you compare that to O.J., where there was actual physical evidence. And I've done several books about this. Like, it's the lies. It's not the crime, the cover-up they always say, and it's the lies that nail you. And it's like, well, why are you lying? If you're not guilty, why are you lying about this, that, and the other? Why are you lying about? And if he had an affair too, why are you lying about the affair? Why are you lying about this? Why did you act like this? And the book I just wrote, it was the same thing. This guy, he was accused of pushing his wife off a cliff in Rocky Mountain National Park, And then they're digging into the case and turns out his first wife also died under similar circumstances. Car fell on her while he was changing a tire. What are the odds?
Ooh.
And in neither case was there any physical evidence or no witnesses, no confessions, but he lied about so many things. He was so suspicious after the fact that the prosecutors were able to make the case that there's only one reason why he would lie, and that's because he was guilty.
But they didn't have any evidence.
No.
Did they use him as a scapegoat to? Do you think they did this on purpose to prove a point?
For which case?
The Peterson case.
No, I mean, I think all signs were pointing to him.
But they didn't have any evidence, Michael.
They didn't have any physical evidence. They have circumstantial evidence.
No, and so you mean to tell me that
very, very strong evidence that he disposed of. That's why, from the very outset, I said, I'm not convinced he meant to kill her. I think they have very strong evidence he disposed of her body, right? They had that evidence of the boat and, going to the Berkeley Marina and all that stuff. So all the stuff that he didn't admit to. And it's like, well, maybe if he had on the outset said, yes, we got in an argument, I punched my pregnant wife, who everybody on earth thought was the most wonderful person ever. I'm a bad person. She bonked her head and died. I freaked out, and I threw her body in the bay.
Oh,
yeah, that would get him 5 to 10 years.
But, okay, so take a look at this.
But he wouldn't be on death row, and he'd actually be out by now.
Yeah, but Michael, what would make somebody do something like that? If it was an accident and he didn't mean to kill her, if that was the case, or even if he did kill her and couldn't he have made it look like an accident and called and said, oh my God, she fell, or we got in a fight? Why didn't he do that?
And this was what I tried to show in my book, Lacey was beloved on a level that was almost kind of disturbing. That she made everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be wonderful. And she had to be wonderful and perfect. That was like the standard by which she lived. Everything had to be perfect. I mean, can you imagine?
But the bad thing about it was she was pregnant.
Yeah.
That's the horrible thing.
And I think he just, whether he meant to kill her or did it by accident or whatever, either way, he was not using good judgment. I mean, first of all, and I remember it was like Jeff Toobin actually told me this. The guy who wrote the book on the OJ things, basically. He used to be a federal prosecutor. And a very common defense is, how can they be so stupid? Of course he's innocent. No one would be that stupid. And then Jeff said, one day it dawned on me, they are that stupid. That's why they're killing people. Okay? Smart people don't solve their problems by disposing of a body. They are that stupid. They are not using good judgment. They are doing stuff that, in the cold light of day, is dumb and counterintuitive and all that sort of thing. So it kind of, the question answers itself, that's why he did it, because he shouldn't have done it. That's why he got caught. So I don't know. I am not convinced that he like plotted to kill her and that it was malice aforethought and all that sort of thing. But I'm the evidence was powerful that he disposed of her.
Now, what city do you live in?
Los Angeles.
Oh, did you ever think of coming to where he's incarcerated and talk with him?
In San Quentin, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't think he's doing jailhouse interviews. When we were People, I'm trying to remember, we did a story on sort of his life in prison, but he's not granting any interviews.
Oh, he isn't?
No.
Oh, it's too bad. That would have been great for you to get an interview for him. But then he might not have told you the truth.
That would be great for a lot of people, too.
Yeah, but he might not have told you the truth anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's still technically appeals that are possible, and, they're not going to say it. People ask me that all the time. Did you interview the killer? And I always find the killers to be the worst subjects in the books, because by the time they get involved, their heads are so full of legal minutia and loopholes that they're looking for, and they're so calculated and so worried about the appeal and everything that they're just not going to tell you the truth. They're just not. They're almost incapable.
You know, I was almost waiting for him to break down and say, okay, look, I'll tell you the truth. This is really what happened.
You rarely see that. My last book, they interrogated the guy for 3 hours, 4 hours, without a lawyer, and he never really admitted it, and it wasn't until later when he was talking to mental health professionals and he decided that he was going to have a insanity defense that he did admit it. But you rarely see, that whole, okay, I did it, where they break them down, just doesn't happen.
Oh, wow. Well, Michael, thanks so much for being on the show.
It was a great time. I hope the audio got better at some point.
Oh, the audio's perfect.
Oh, good.
Yeah, audio. You don't need those that mic because your audio was great. Everybody was able to hear you. Anyway, thank you so much. I love true crime. My viewers, we just love true crime, and especially the unsolved ones. That's our favorite. And it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, any of your viewers, you can reach me through Facebook or on truecrimepage.com or michaelfleeman.com is my just sort of basic website. And catch Dateline on Friday if you're interested in the case, the Harold Henthorn case that I'm writing about for my next book.
Right, and all your books are on Amazon.com. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Michael. Right. You have a wonderful weekend coming up.
I will. You too.
Thank you so much.
All right. So long.
Good night. Oh, wow. You know what? Oh my God, I love true crime. Did you guys like the show? And Michael, again, if you're listening, thank you again so much for being on the show. That's one of my favorite topics, and I hope to do more of this. So everybody, thanks so much for being here. We had a nice full crowd again tonight. We had about 110 people again, and I want to thank you all for being here. I got some good stuff coming up. Hey, you know what's coming up next week on Thursday? Tony and Deborah Pickman. They're going to talk about the Sally House. And I can't wait for that. And they're also going to talk about a project that they're starting up with Carissa Fleck of the Horsefly Chronicles case. They've got a project that they're working on, and it's to help those that have been attacked by evil entities and the dark. And they'll talk about all that, but I'm really excited to have them talk about the Sally House. I've wanted them for a long time to come on the show. And then the following Tuesday, on March 10th, oh my God, I can't wait for this one. Jackie Barrett. She interviewed, she's a famous clairvoyant psychic. She's been on TV so many times. And she interviewed Ronnie DeFeo of the Amityville Horror House. And she's going to talk about that interview, and she's also going to talk about the Amityville Horror House, and I'm so excited. I love that topic. Oh, and let's see, also coming up, I have Jeremy Leonard returning with Joy Stinson. I don't know if you saw that show that I did with Jeremy. It was absolutely fabulous. It was a story like I have never heard before. And he's coming back. They had demonic possession in the home, and I have the audio clips for it. It's unbelievable. Also, I'm going to redo the show on the Corpsewood murders. I have a fellow who works for the sheriff's department. He lives in Georgia, and he said, Noreen, if you want, he said, I can tell you the real true story of the Corpsewood Castle murders. And he said there was the occult involved, there was satanic rituals involved, and he sent me a video of at that time when this was all committed, a video of the newspaper people that had taken videos of the crime scene and talked about the murders, and he wanted to come on the show and talk about the real story. So we're redoing the Corpsewood murders. Then, oh my God, then on April 21st, Dave Spinks, me, and David Weatherly, we're going to do another show on disappearances. And I'm not going to tell you what it's on because this is so freaky. Dave told me about it, and oh my God, it's going to be a good show. I'm not telling you till I post it for the event, because it's really creepy. It's a strange disappearance, and I'm not. That's all I'm going to tell you. Then I have coming up, I have Phil Sarkusa, the Horsefly Chronicle House is coming back, and he's going to tell us what he never said on camera before. And I know there's things that he has not told us, and regardless of what anybody has heard, that case is real. And Dave and I would have not worked with Phil if we did not believe that case was real. And he's coming back on the show, and it's going to be really awesome because he's going to talk to us about stuff that's going to blow your mind. Oh my God, you guys, you're not going to believe this. Guess what? I'm also having a guest, and we're going to talk about near-death experiences and also death visions. I'm excited about that show. I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to bring that to you. And then, too, Rob Gutro is coming back, and we're going to be talking about pets go to heaven, or pets in heaven, saying goodbye. And that's going to be a tearjerker show. And I'll put up a link the week before, so you can send me pictures if you want your sweet little pet picture to be shown, and I'll put it on a video so it'll continually to play all the little pets. Give me your pet's name and your name that's connected to your sweet little pet. And I'm going to do a show on Bobby Mackey's with Dave Spinks, and then I also have a guest coming on. Tales from the French Quarter, voodoo and all the scary stuff. So I got some good stuff coming up, so hang in there with me. Anyway, so let me do some shout outs, and again, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Again, Michael Fleeman, thank you so much for being on the show. I so enjoyed it. All right, let's do some shout outs. Ginger Simmons, Sean Bodine, River, oh come on now, here we go. River Culver, Andrew Cox, Griffin Corcoran, Janet W., Nicole Groom, Spooky, hi Spooky and Raven, Butterfly Kisses, Chippa Aaron Kemp, Donna Gordon, Crystal Tripp, oh my God, you guys, Crystal Trippett, thank you for modding, Moral Madness, Putty Tat, Meow Meow, Tiffany Twisted, Summer Sims, Jimmy, hi Jimmy honey, how are you? Jimmy Cortez, remember to keep positive thoughts for Jimmy. He had some tests that came out that weren't very well, did not go very well, so please pray for him and give him positive thoughts. Elaine Michael, Nancy Soplaveda, Brick Bossy, Angel Simmons, Zoe, oh God, what happened here? Oh my God, I just lost it. Oh my God, you guys. Zoe, oh man, I saw Zoe Small, Diane Zeman Marks. Hey Diane, my old friend, I've known her for years. Thanks Diane, we did a show together, Interdimensional Being. Unknown EVP, Sandra Miller. Oh God, this is awful. Oh, you know what? Joey the Dark Water, thanks Joey for joining us. Super Witchy Gamer, F Warrior, Danella Daywood Love, Sergeant Fluffy, cute. Okay. See, I lost you guys now. Ginger Simmons, Margarita Halverveth, Miss Paula. Miss Paula. Are you the witch, Miss Paula? Let's see. Tracy Booning. All right. Booning. Okay. Tracy, Buening. Give me how I should say that. Boining. And my friends Spooky and Raven, I've known her for years. She's got a show on Tuesday nights. Don't forget to tune in. And anything but ordinary. It's fabulous, and she's on YouTube. Oh God, This is really. Okay, see, I missed all of this, you guys. I'm sorry. This just went too fast, and I lost some of these. Oh, Pretty Paranormal. Anybody? I See Lies. Hi, honey. Anybody else? The Unseen Scene. You know, I saw so many of you in chat earlier. Anybody else want to shout out? Royce, thanks so much. Royce, thanks so much for being a mod. He's been a mod for me for so long. Crystal and Putty Tat, thanks for modding. Anybody else want to shout out? Anybody else? Okay, I'm going down the line. Oh, let's see. Okay, so yes, I have a really good lineup. It takes an awful lot of time to find guests for the show. I try to find interesting guests. After this year, I don't know what I'm going to do for next year. It's if you guys have any suggestions. Russell Hilgendorf, Jessica Luna, Unknown EVP. Anybody else want to shout out that I missed? Oh gosh. So anyway, yeah, it's really hard finding. It's really difficult finding shows because I went really interesting shows and it's really hard. And I don't want to do a show unless I have a guest. I don't, so. Anyway, if you guys have any suggestions, send them to me, ParanormalZoneTV@gmail.com. You can always contact me through that email. And if you guys are on Facebook, if you would please give my fan page a like. It's Do You Believe web series fan page, and it's on Facebook. If you guys would please... Tracy, thanks, honey. I would really appreciate it if you would give it a like. So anyway, I'm going to go now. Going to get something to eat. And again, I want to thank you all so much for being in the show and for joining me every week. And Janet W., did I say hi to you too? Again, Zoe Small. Zoe, I have a kitty. One of my kitties is named Zoe. Carl White, there you are. Okay, guys. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Have a wonderful weekend. And stay safe. And, Lily Villalobos. Anita Ackerman. Lynn Bowling. So you guys were hiding. Okay. So everybody, good night. Have a great weekend. Be safe. And I'll see you next Thursday. With Deborah and Tony Pickman, the Sally House. So I'll see you guys next week, okay? I love you guys. Just know that I love you and care about you. Ma Bear. Hi, Ma Bear. Well, show's over, honey. So, okay. So good night, guys. I love you. See you next week. Good night. Sherry K. Montalbano. Okay, send me messages. ParanormalZoneTV@gmail.com. Good night, everyone. Love you. Summer Sims, I said good night. Yeah. Good night, everybody. Thank you.